Part 1.
You will hear a telephone conversation between a woman and the secretary of a cycling club. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 10. Listen carefully to the conversation and answer questions 1 to 10.
Cuxford Cycle Club?
Oh, yes, hello. I'm calling to inquire about joining the club.
Fine. What would you like to know?
Well, I wanted to get a picture of what the club is like. For example, how big it is.
Now, that changes each year, of course. Cycling is growing in popularity.
I'm sure.
So, last year we had nearly 70 members, which was a record in itself. But this year, there are 76 people on the list, and I'd say at least 60 of them come to events regularly. I should think something like 85 is a likely figure by next year.
That's bigger than I expected.
Yes, there are plenty of opportunities to meet people.
And how much does it cost to join?
It depends. £40 is for standard members, and there are reductions for certain categories. For example, veteran and youth members pay £10 less, £30. And family membership works out at £25 per head. All those charges are per year.
And youth means?
Under 18.
Oh, that covers me, at least at the moment.
Then for safety reasons, your application will need to be endorsed, so your teacher or parent needs to sign your form.
No problem. So what happens after I've sent the form in to you?
We deal with it and get a confirmation of acceptance with a membership card out to you in 3 weeks. And then you're ready to ride. It lasts a year, and we send you a renewal 1 month before it's due to expire.
OK. And can you tell me something about the activities you do?
Yes, there's a range of things to reflect the varied membership. There are the family rides, which are pretty popular, held every month, and that might get increased to every 2 weeks.
I don't know if that's really for me.
You might prefer the Saturday rides, which are more popular with the youth members. We don't go huge distances, 100 kilometres or anything like that. 60 kilometres is about average, but the pace is fairly brisk.
Let's hope I'll be able to keep up.
Oh, actually, there's something I should have mentioned before. We've got to be sure everyone's bike is roadworthy, so you'll need to have your bike checked and obtain a safety certificate for it. Most bike shops will do that for you.
Fine. Do you do any longer tours, like holidays?
Yes, there's a camping tour at least twice a year. There's one on July the 14th, though it'll get booked up very soon. If you miss that, then there's another on August the 17th.
Oh, good.
But obviously there's plenty going on before then. You might want to come along on May the 5th. Your membership should be through by then, and that's when we have a picnic. Everyone brings some food to share, and we go out to the hills and eat there.
That sounds fun. I'm going to fill in my form as soon as I get off the phone.
And a further benefit of membership is the discount with wheels.
The shop on Mill Road?
Yes, the manager's a member of the club, and he'll give you a 15% reduction. It means membership can pay for itself.
Great. Well, you'll be getting my form soon.
Good. I look forward to meeting you.
That is the end of Part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 2. Part 2.
You will hear part of a local radio program in which the head of the Park Arts Center is interviewed about events that are going to be held at the center. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 20. Now listen to the conversation and answer questions 11 to 20.
And next on City Life this week, we have with us in the studio Harvey Bowles, head of the Park Arts Centre. He's here to tell us about forthcoming events at the centre. Harvey, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
So, what can we look forward to first at the Park Centre?
We've got a very exciting programme lined up for you. The next event will start on the 18th of February and run till the 24th. Times for the event? Twice each day at 2:30 and 7:30 p.m. There'll be a folk music concert and we're sure this is going to be very popular. A range of excellent musicians are coming, some playing for the first time in this country. And for those who want a souvenir, or for people who don't manage to get to the performances, the foyer shop will be selling a CD showcasing the great talents of the performers.
Sounds good.
Yes, and then after that, our next event is starting on the 1st of March and runs for 8 days. There's a lot going on, so you'll need to look in the separate programme, which shows all the various times and so on. It also includes details of performers and ticket prices. You can pick one up from the foyer at the centre. Yes, this year we're hosting the dance festival again, and it's going to be even bigger than last year. It's become a major feature of the arts year, and many of the performances will be recorded on video and DVD. But nothing can beat the thrill of attending the events live. We have a great range of styles, performed by over 100 groups, representing as many as 4 continents. All I can say is book early, because many of the shows are going to sell out quickly.
I'm sure they will. And what do you have for us after that?
Well, then things get a little quieter, but no less interesting. From the 14th to the 20th of March, every evening at 8, we go into cinema mode, and we're showing a fine new film. I expect you've seen reviews of it. Love and Hope.
Oh, yes, wonderful.
Yes, and it's not just an ordinary screening. We're delighted that each screening will be introduced by a short lecture by the producer, who will also leave a little time for questions from the audience. Again, I recommend early booking for this. It's bound to be popular.
I'll be there. Anything else lined up at this point?
Yes, we've got a special one-day event on April the 2nd. The times aren't fixed yet, but I can tell you that we're having a singing competition.
Oh, yes?
There'll be a large number of entrants, and the talent should be impressive. And Channel 6 are coming. So, the event is going to be shown on TV. So, come and be part of the audience.
I'm sure people will want to. Well, Harvey, thank you very much for coming in and telling us all this. Details of all the events are on your website, aren't they?
Yes, the address is www.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3. We'll hear a conversation between Mrs. Lamb, a member of the staff in a large hospital, and Andrew, who is a student in the nursing school. Mrs. Lamb is explaining the rules about visiting hours in the hospital.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hello, Andrew. I believe you want to know about visiting hours.
Yes, I do, Mrs. Lamb. I have to fill this form out, and I'd like to have some idea why the different parts of the hospital have different times for visiting.
I see. Well, let's start with an obvious one. Intensive care. People in intensive care are very sick indeed, and for that reason, we say that visitors can come between 6 a.m. and midnight.
I can understand that.
At the other end of the scale, our maternity patients are usually quite well, but we restrict their visiting hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. We find they get very tired if we permit visitors all the time.
I see. What about the surgical wards?
The doctors prefer to do their rounds early in surgical, so visiting hours are 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Surgical patients are often on very heavy painkillers, and they aren't really very good company for their visitors.
But surely the visitors come to cheer up the patient, not the other way round.
Of course. And often the visitors are able to help the patient a lot. That's why we allow visitors all day, the full 24 hours in the emergency ward. They help comfort the patient while they're waiting to be diagnosed. Of course, it's not just everyone who can visit a sick patient. People in intensive care can only be visited by their immediate family. What's more, we only allow 2 people in at any time. We let children of the immediate family in to visit people in intensive care, but we don't like to do it. It's very hard on the children, and it may distress the patient. However, if the patient asks for the child, and the family agrees, that's okay.
What about children in maternity?
Of course we let them in. They're very pleased to see their mothers. The rule in maternity is everyone may visit, up to 6 people at a time. The maternity ward is quite sociable after all.
The surgical ward must be different.
It is indeed. We don't allow children in the surgical ward because of the danger of infection. And as you know, we restrict the hours. There are a lot of procedures which must be carried out on surgical patients, and we only let 2 visitors come in at a time.
And in emergency, people are allowed to visit all the time?
Oh yes, we rely on patients' relatives to be there for them, and we permit everyone to visit the emergency department at all hours. However, we restrict it to 3 visitors for each patient. Otherwise, the room just gets totally crowded.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Now I have your schedule for the next week's observation sessions. Are you ready?
Yes. Where do I start?
On Monday, you'll be in male surgical in the morning and in female surgical in the afternoon. You'll be following Dr. Shea on her rounds.
Thank you. And on Tuesday?
On Tuesday, you'll be with Dr. Thomas in the morning and Dr. Robertson in the afternoon. No, that can't be right. You're with Dr. Thomas in the afternoon and Dr. Robertson in the morning.
Do I ever get to see Dr. Kim?
Yes, you'll be with Dr. Kim on Thursday and Friday. She'll take you through the children's ward and through our new teenage ward for 12 to 15-year-olds.
Great. I've read a lot about that new ward. Will I see the schoolroom?
Maybe another time.
And what will I do on Wednesday?
On Wednesday, you'll join the other students for lectures. You'll be in the Redmore lecture room between 8 and 10 a.m. and later between 2 and 3 p.m.
Thank you. Do you know how big my class is?
The intake this term is 200 first-year students. I'm pleased to say about 1/3 are men, which is good. Nursing used to be an almost entirely female occupation.
I know. My father trained as a nurse, and he was considered very unusual.
Is he still working as a nurse?
Yes, he's working in a hospital in the country. I guess I just wanted to follow his example.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4.
You will hear a lecturer talking about dust storms. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 36. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 36.
In the last lecture, we looked at the adverse effects of desert dust on global climate. Today, we're going to examine more closely what causes dust storms and what other effects they can have. As you know, dust storms have always been a feature of desert climates, but what we want to focus on today is the extent to which human activity is causing them. And it's this trend that I want to look at, because it has wide-ranging implications. So, what are these human activities? Well, there are two main types that affect the wind erosion process, and thus the frequency of dust storms. There are activities that break up naturally wind-resistant surfaces, such as off-road vehicle use and construction. And there are those that remove protective vegetation cover from soils, for example, mainly farming and drainage. In many cases, the two effects occur simultaneously, which adds to the problem. Let's look at some real examples and see what I'm talking about. Perhaps the best-known example of agricultural impact on desert dust is the creation of the USA's Dust Bowl in the 1930s. The dramatic rise in the number of dust storms during the latter part of that decade was the result of farmers mismanaging their land. In fact, choking dust storms became so commonplace that the decade became known as the Dirty 30s. Researchers observed a similar but more prolonged increase in dustiness in West Africa between the 1960s and the 1980s, when the frequency of the storms rose to 80 a year, and the dust was so thick that visibility was reduced to 1,000 meters. This was a hazard to pilots and road users. In places like Arizona, the most dangerous dust clouds are those generated by dry thunderstorms. Here, this type of storm is so common that the problem inspired officials to develop an alert system to warn people of oncoming thunderstorms. When this dust is deposited, it causes all sorts of problems for machine operators. It can penetrate the smallest nooks and crannies and play havoc with the way things operate, because most of the dust is made up of quartz, which is very hard. Another example. The concentration of dust originating from the Sahara has risen steadily since the mid-1960s. This increase in wind erosion has coincided with a prolonged drought, which has gripped the Sahara's southern fringe. Drought is commonly associated with an increase in dust-raising activity, but it's actually caused by low rainfall, which results in vegetation dying off.
In the second part, the speaker talks about the drying up of the Aral Sea. Look at questions 37 to 40 and complete the flowchart.
One of the foremost examples of modern human-induced environmental degradation is the drying up of the Aral Sea in Central Asia. Its ecological demise dates from the 1950s, when intensive irrigation began in the then Central Asian republics of the USSR. This produced a dramatic decline in the volume of water entering the sea from its two major tributaries. In 1960, the Aral Sea was the fourth largest lake in the world, but since that time it has lost 2/3 of its volume. Its surface area has halved, and its water level has dropped by more than 216 metres. A knock-on effect of this ecological disaster has been the release of significant new sources of wind-blown material as the water level has dropped. And the problems don't stop there. The salinity of the lake has increased so that it is now virtually the same as seawater. This means that the material that is blown from the dry bed of the Aral Sea is highly saline. Scientists believe it is adversely affecting crops around the sea because salts are toxic to plants. This shows that dust storms have numerous consequences beyond their effects on climate, both for the workings of environmental systems and for people living in drylands.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.